All right, so in this video, I'm going to actually be converting the code that we made in the other video into Streamlit as opposed to just it being in the terminal in um, Visual Studio Code. So what we're going to do is just copy this whole file here. And so I just did Control A, and then I'm going to go do Control C, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste this into Project 3 streamlit.py here, which is an empty file. Then what I'm going to actually do is go to the very top of this file. The documentation will stand because this is just for our knowledge when we go back to this project. And I'm going to actually minimize rooms because we're not going to change that. I'm going to also minimize the room coordinates. And we have those three, but we also have Tkinter. And we actually don't necessarily need to use Tkinter anymore because we're using Streamlit. So I'm going to just completely get rid of this information here. And also get rid of this, just do the Tkinter part, get rid of that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is just minimize our room pixel position. And we're going to then we'll modify this a little bit later because we do have to add a little bit of changes here, but we're going to go to our planning phase function. So I'm going to minimize this for right now until I get ready to use any of this. So we're in the planning phase function right here. And we already know that we're going to be using input here. And we have a few prints that we have displaying out. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to compare. In the terminal version, we used print and input to kind of talk to the player. But since we're using Streamlit, the page is actually going to redraw every time we interact with the user. So we're going to be replacing print with st.write, or if you wanted to use st subheader for some of the subheading text. And then we're also going to be using our input. We're going to be converting our inputs to radio buttons and also just using st buttons for our choices, radio, and for our actions, the button. And instead of us actually at the very bottom returning a new state for this planning phase, we're actually going to change this, and we're going to actually call an strerun function here because this is going to help the app to immediately show our heist screen as well. And so that's pretty much what we're going to modify. So first I'm going to replace all of my prints and input, and then I'm going to use them to call our Streamlit UI widgets. So at the very top here, where I have this, I'm just going to, it's the header, just going to say st.write. And of course, since we're using Streamlit, right underneath our input random, we have to import Streamlit as st. That way we can actually use it. So now we see that it works here. So we have our header. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing here, st.write. st.write. So now that we kind of have our output information being displayed here, we can actually even have this, instead of being write, we can just have this be a subheader. So instead of write, we'll do subheader, and then we're passing in our header string here. So we'll save this. All right, so now that we have this, the next thing that we're actually going to do is we're going to modify our role here, our option that the user gets to see or display out. So instead of just it being role here, we're going to place in front of this and this function is actually just going to be modified quite a bit. So We have our subheader, our planning phase mode, but we can actually just use, and we're going to be combining this whole section here into one. So we have our role message here, which gets displayed out. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to use our radio button here. We'll just use this roles. Yeah, we'll update it here. So we're just going to use our role variable here, and we're going to assign to it whatever the input is after the radio button. So we're going to do SD radio, and we're going to put in here first, choose your role, colon. And then afterwards here, what we're going to do is we're going to have, and I'm going to put this on a new line so you can actually see it better on the screen. We're going to have a few strings here, but we're going to place it inside of a list so it gets displayed out as options. Unfortunately for us, we put this already in like kind of formatted strings, so we don't have to do much, just copy and paste. So for the first option here, we're just going to use the hacker section. And then comma, we're going to place this, oops, there, comma, then we're going to place this on our new line. We're going to do the same thing for the insider person here, comma, new line, and then we're going to do the very last one, which is planner, balanced, safer route. All right. So now that we have this process here, let's go ahead and place this here. Okay, we no longer actually need this role message section. We also no longer need that st.write version there. So we only have one st.write, which is the planning message. We have our radio button that has the three options that we can pick from. And then we're also going to absolutely get rid of this whole section because we no longer need to take an input. We don't need a dictionary to track what user picked what. And we're also going to update the state role later on in an if-elif kind of loop there. All right. So in this section here, we're also going to just keep everything kind of in the same place. So we're going to do the same thing for this route message here. So we're just going to do route equals st.radio. And we're just going to say, choose your route, comma. And we're going to have our list here, open, close, square brackets, then quotes. All right. So inside the first quotes here, we're just going to put the front door as the first route. Then in the second route here, we're going to put the ventilation system. Then in the third route here, we're going to place the remote hack. Then in the fourth route here, we're just going to do the social engineering process. Okay. And we'll just get rid of this section below, along with this. Right. All right, so now we have our radio button for both of these. The next thing we actually want to do is use our create a button to actually start the heist. So in this case here, we will have our heist location at some point in our block of code, but it won't be right now. So we'll keep that. But right here, this is where we will start or use a button. So we're going to say if st.button And we're just going to place in here start heist. And then inside of this, to go along with the button, we're going to first inquire of the role that the user would like to pick. So we're going to say if role dot, and we're going to use the built-in function called start with. And this start with is just going to return a Boolean value if it starts with hacker. For example, that line specifically does start with hacker. We're going to go ahead and place that in. So we're going to say if it starts with hacker, colon, we're going to update the state role. And we're going to assign it hacker. And we're going to do this for the insider as well. So we're just going to do elif role dot start with side. And then we're going to update the role here. And we're going to assign it inside. Then the next thing we're going to do is have our else statement, and we're going to have update our state role here. And then we're just going to call it planner. We're going to update that to be planner. So now that we have things for our updated role here, the next thing we're going to do is just have our route, and we're going to have starting room. So in this case here, I'm just going to say if the route dot starts with front door, then we're going to update the state route to front. And then we're going to have the start room equal the lobby. All right, and so then the next thing that we're actually going to do here is we want to do the same for the ventilation system. And I'm going to do start with open, close parentheses, and then we're going to have ventilation, colon. And then we're going to have our state with the route. And then we're going to have vents here. We're going to assign vents to that route. And then we're going to have our start room, and we're going to assign it the vent shaft. Now the next thing is going to be elif route dot start with social. And we're going to have the state be route, or yeah, the state be route here. And then we're going to assign social here. And then we're going to have our start room here. And we're just going to say the office. And then lastly, we're going to have our else statement, and we're going to have our state route being remote. And we're going to have our starting room being the van. Okay, so now that we have this here in our code, the next thing that we want to do is we need to actually update our state inside of our code here. So we do have where it updates the heist. Great. We now need to also update the current room as well. We're going to pass in their current room, and we're just going to assign the starting room to that. And then you can keep the prints if you want to be able to see this, or you can even do st.write if you would like, which we can actually do if you'd like. So st.write, open, st.write. All right. And then the very last thing we're going to do, and this is just to prevent you from having, because the way that The way that Streamlit works is we're going to be using sessions in this and we're going to update it so that every time you click on the button, it doesn't pretty much rerun or start over the specific session. So for this specific case, because we are using sessions, we want to have a force and immediate rerun so that the main will see the location as heist now after we click the button. If we don't have this, it will showcase, we'll have to probably click it twice, or it will showcase the previous information as opposed to the current information. So we're going to do st.rerun. And this is forcing an immediate run. This will make sense in a moment. I'll comment it out when I actually showcase the testing part. We are also going to get rid of this return state part. We no longer need it, but we are going to need to include something in here to kind of show the state. And this is just for my purposes. I like to know what's happening where. So we're going to add this in last, but it's going to be show history is what I'm going to name that function. And I'm going to pass in the state. And since it's not defined yet, it'll look like that, but I'm just going to go ahead and define it here. And then I'm going to use pass until I'm ready to add the necessary information in there. Okay, so now that we have finished at least modifying our planning phase, I'm just going to put a comment here, done, modifying. All right, so the next thing that we're actually going to do, now that we have completed this, we're going to move on to the actual main loop before we had inside of the main loop, and I'm going to have to minimize this. It's pretty long right now. We had in here our state, which we're now going to modify and make sessions. We have our show introduction and our while loop, and then our thanks message. So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to create a separate function to initialize the state. And what we're going to place in the main is just going to be our caption and our title of the actual game. We're going to also display pretty much how the game is, and then we're going to call the function to initialize the state and modify some of this functionality in here as well. So, and we will obviously be using this a little bit further at the top. So what I'm going to do is just copy this state dictionary. And I'm going to go to the top of the code. And right underneath my, keep them all together. We'll just love it. So right here, we're going to just paste this session state. And we're going to paste this here, and we will modify this in a moment. But right now, we can get rid of it in the main function. And since this is going to be inside of a separate function, what I'm going to do is just define the function and have this dictionary be in there until we're ready to modify the rest of it. So I'm just going to define this function initialize or init, in this case, state, which is just going to initialize the values of the state. We're going to tab this over. And we'll just add more and modify it later. So now we're going to just get rid of this here. And we're going to open up the show introduction really quickly. And looking at this, we can actually keep the call. But what we'll do here is just have our st.write. Modify this again in the show introduction, st.write. st.write. And then we're just going to have down here our st.write as well. All right, so now that we have this updated in our show introduction function, now it should be able to display in our main menu when it calls. And actually, there's one more thing. We have our show right. So right here where we're using the introduction, since this is actually just meant to be kind of like a caption, we can actually use caption, or you can even use subheader. It's completely up to you, but I'm going to just use caption here to display all of this information in there. So now we have this, we have our function call. We're going to now underneath our show introduction, we're going to call the init underscore state function. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set a state here to be initialized by our session state. So we're going to use the variable state here, and we're going to do st.session underscore state dot state. All right. And so in this case, what we're going to do, because this will keep the game state in our specific session, this is going to allow it to happen between different reruns. So then the next thing that we want to do is we need to include an if statement. Because while libs kind of interrupt sometimes in the way that it's structured at the present with the sessions and Streamlit's functionality behind the scenes. And so in this case here, I'm just going to do if the state game underscore over, and it's going to check the value for that, either true, so it's true in that case. Then we're going to call the print underscore heist underscore outcome function with the state, the current state that we have there. And then we are going to use our return statement. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to have here, and I'm just going to get rid of this while loop here. And we're going to tab this over. We're going to modify our location. So here we have if state location is equivalent to planning. We're actually going to call, because now it doesn't return the state, we're going to call the planning phase function, passing in the state here as well. All right, and then the next part here that we have is we want to include two other things here because, again, we're modifying it to fit Streamlit. So before this, we're just going to have elif, state, and we're going to access the location, and we're going to compare if the location value is equivalent to the vault. Then we are going to call the final underscore vault underscore choice function, passing in the state here. And then we have our elif state location is equivalent to heist. We have the heist phase here, but we need to modify this. So we're going to say, and we're going to be using modes for this. And this is going to be keeping track of what functionality the student is, or the user is using. And we're just going to also add in, because in the heist phase, there are two sections that are included in that. And we want to be able to have a subsection for the hacking screen, which will show the pretty much where the person has to guess the code. So here we're going to say if the state, and we need to update obviously our state for this. And we're going to just use mode as the key, is equivalent to normal. Then we will call the heist phase with the state. Elif, the state mode is equivalent to hack. We're going to call a function that we're going to create called, let's do hack, we'll do hack phase. Or it's not phase, we'll do screen, hack screen. And we're going to pass in the state there. All right. So right above this, I believe what I will do is underneath the heist phase, I'm just going to add in our hack screen, and I'm going to create it, define that function, and we're going to type in pass for right now, and we'll add functionality to it in a bit when we get to it. All right. So now that we have this section here, we can actually also change this part to be st.write. And now we have it where it's going to keep the session state in the same place. It's going to replace the loop with a simple if branch. And this is going to be helpful for our planning phase and showing the planning, the actual information in that, as well as the heist and also the hacking part. So the next part of this is we're going to actually turn the enter room into two different functions. We're going to turn it into the showroom, and then we're going to also modify our heist portion of it. All right, or is it the showroom, or what is this one called? Or enter room rather. So in the original game, we had one big enter room function that prints out both the room and loops on the user's input. In Streamlit, we have to split this into two parts. One that's going to show room just to show the description and the exits. And then another one that's just going to be for the heist phase here, where it's just going to handle that input and use as the submit button when the player clicks that submit button. So we can handle this to update the state, and then we're going to redraw the room based off of the current room's information. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to, since the terminal version takes in that while loop and the input, and we can't loop and block, we're just going to split this into three functions. So instead of it being enter room, we're going to call it showroom. Here. Okay. And it's still going to take in the showroom the state, but we're going to modify this to just be the room name, right? And we're also going to have another function. So I'm going to go ahead and define those functions first so we can just copy and paste any code that we need to move into that until we're ready to get to it. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to define um, a thing called handle underscore command. So the commands, we're going to break that up. We're going to do pass. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to use our heist phase, and that's going to be also broken up since it also uses enter room. And we're just going to modify this so that it doesn't look the same as the actual code and just using the function in the right way to being our, we'll keep it here as heist phase here. We won't modify it to heist screen, but this is where we're going to modify or place a lot of information. So what I'm going to do is just to keep it organized at the present. Modify this. Um, I will just move this heist phase closer up to the other functions. So as we modify, we can see it a little bit closer. Add mod. And okay. So now that we are in the showroom function, this is just going to be what just purely displays it's just going to be what purely displays the room and any logic associated to this. And so what I'm going to do, since we do have a hack function below, I'm just going to copy that and just paste it in here until we're ready to use it and just get rid of it here for right now. All right. And then in this specific showroom, we are going to actually keep the room data here, but we're going to obviously modify this to just be, oh, this should be room name, not room. It's going to be room name. Okay. And so now that we have this here, and we're also going to be kind of getting rid of this update avatar and spreading them across the functions that we already have. So I'm just going to move that out of the way as well. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to have a subheader. So we're going to just say st subheader, and we're going to pass in the room data with the name. And then we're going to do st.write, and we're going to write in the room data with its description here. And so that's simply what we have here. If you want, you can use this as well, if that's something that you're up to, so we can actually make it the st.write. And then we'll just get rid of this here. All right, and so the next thing we want to look at, and we'll also, again, modify this later. So we're going to just get rid of that special room case. We're going to look at the available exits. And so for the sake of this, we're just going to write st.write here. And because we want to make it like bold, we're going to do asterisk, asterisk here, and then asterisk, asterisk here. And then what we have is we'll keep this the same. But instead here where we have the print, we're just going to do st.write. And below here, we're going to add st.write, but we're going to add a little bit more information here instead. So what I'm going to say is you can also type, and we'll do help inventory search hack quit. Okay. So the next thing here, this is all the showroom is going to have in it. So we're going to go ahead and we will take the hack mini puzzle process, copy that, and move that down to this hack function here. And we will modify this a bit later as well. So don't worry too much about that. And the next thing that we will actually have is our handle command function. So I'm just going to move some of this code elsewhere until we are ready to use it. So I'm just going to have a miscellaneous function. This will just be deleted later, and just paste that in there. Okay. So now that we have completed here in this section, the showroom function, passing in the state, we're going to go ahead at the very top and say done. And then we're going to look at the handle command function here. So in the handle command function, what we want to include in this is going to just be the command that the user entered in. So we're going to type in command, and then we're going to also have the state. So let me just make sure. Oh, I did accidentally, let's go back to the showroom function. I did accidentally remove a function that we actually need. I don't know why I deleted that. But the handle special room logic, we're going to keep that the same. We just need to call the room name, comma, the state there. Now it's done. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the handle command function. And this one, we're just going to use the command. So we're going to say command equals, and we're just going to strip it of any white spaces and make sure that it's uppercase so that we can use it in our if statements. So we're going to say if the command is equivalent to an empty string, then we're going to return nothing. And then here we're just going to make sure that the current room variable here, we're going to update it based off of the state. So whatever the current room is, that the value that's associated to the current room, that's going to get stored into our current room variable. And then we're going to do the same thing with room data. We're going to access our global dictionary at the very top called rooms, and we're going to type in the key current room so that the value associated there gets assigned to room data. Then the next thing that we're going to do here is we're just going to have our if statements. So we're going to say if command in, and this is actually going to be in, where is it? It's not this one. I think it's actually in the heist phase. Okay, I guess not. That's fine. All right, so yeah, if command is in, and we'll do Q, comma, quit. So if it's in that tuple, then we're going to, and this is going to be in my function called log underscore move. And this is just going to log the user's information and kind of display it onto the screen here. But inside of this log move, we're going to take the current underscore room, the command, and the current room and the state. And again, this is optional. I just like to be able to see, I just like to be able to see what room I'm in. And since this is on Streamlit and not through the terminal, we're just going to display it as a JSON at the bottom. So I'm going to actually just make this right above the main, and we'll just modify it later again. All right. So now that we're done with this line of code, we're gonna then update our state with the game over key here. And we're going to assign to that key the value true. Then we're going to do st.write, and we're going to say you quit the heist and slip back into the shadows. And then at the very end of this, we're just going to return. And then what we're going to actually do here after that line, quit shadows return. Now we're going to actually do the next part of this, which is going to be the help one. So this is going to be similar to what we had here. And so we can actually just copy this as well as the inventory. We'll actually copy all of this and modify it now inside of that function since this is a part of it. And we'll just get rid of this miscellaneous function because we've pretty much gotten all of the main code here. And we're just going to modify it inside of this code one step at a time. So instead of it being choice here, we're just going to say if if the command is equivalent to help, then what we're going to do is have st.write and make this all st.write. And we can also do Control F and be able to replace all of this, but because I do not want to make a simple mistake, I'm just going to leave it like this. So here we have use labels shown, and instead of above, we're just going to say in the room, and we have our N, S, E, W out back, and we're going to also include our F and our B, etc. And then the next thing we have, and we're going to just break this up into kind of one st right here. We'll modify this since it's going to be on Streamlit process. We're just going to say other commands. We will be using the inventory, comma, search sometimes, comma, hack, and we'll indicate in the server room, and then quit. All right. So now that we have this, we're actually not going to use continue because Streamlit uses something, the process is a little bit different. So in fact, what we're going to do instead is just do return. So now that we have that here, and I'm just going to make sure that I label this so I'm aware we got help, we got quit. Now the next thing that we're going to be looking at is our inventory. Okay. So if the command is equivalent to inventory, we're going to have if state inventory, then here we're just going to do st.write for item and state, and then here we're just going to do st.write. And then we have our else statement, and we want to make sure that is st.write. And then we're going to, at the end of this, we're just going to return. And for both of these, the help and the inventory function, we're going to also be calling our log move function when we actually add it in here. So I'm going to call that anyways. Again, this is optional. You do not need to do that. But if you'd like to be able to see your commands, you can do it that way. All right. So now the next thing I'm going to modify is the searching office functionality here. And I'm just gonna start here. And so here we have, if the current room is equivalent to office, and instead of choice, we're gonna put command is equivalent to search. Then here we're also going to call our log move function. If the key card is not in the state inventory list, then here we're gonna modify the print to st.write. Then we're going to update the inventory by appending key card and update the crew's morale. We have our else statement, so we're going to make sure that we do st.write. And then we're going to actually get rid of continue and replace it with return. All right. And then the very next thing that we're actually going to be looking into is we're going to be looking into the hacking portion of it. So I'm actually going to get that straight from the hacking screen section. I thought maybe I'd have to use it in there, but it seems like we only need to have like a little bit of it inside of this function. We're not actually going to be using a lot of this functionality anyways, especially with the while loop. Minimize and paste it. Okay. So now we have our hack mini puzzle in the server room. Here, we're going to say if the current room is equivalent to the server room, and here we're going to update this to be command equals hack. Then here we are going to call our log move function once we add that in. And I'm just going to tab this over. And this print statement here, what we're going to do is just do st, right? Okay. All right. And now the next thing we're actually going to do here is we're going to update our mode and our hacking attempt. So this we're going to be adding to our state. So here we're going to use the state, and we're going to update our mode now to be hack. We're going to add the value there. And then the next thing we're going to do is update the hack attempts to being 3. And immediately after this, because this will be if the user, was able to hack it correctly, this screen is going to pop up and it's going to say like submitting button here. We're going to use st.rerun. Okay, and then afterwards, we're just going to have our return statement. Now, again, because Streamlit has a lot of the functionality that we don't need anyways, we don't actually have to have all of this information. It's going to be in a separate section. And in fact, some of this, especially the random words in this update, is probably more than likely going to be in our hacking function. So I'm just going to copy that and place it in our hacking function until we are ready to modify it again. Okay, so now that we have our hack, the next thing we want to do is focus in on the movement. And so with the movement here, which is our exits, we're going to just have at the very top here underneath this, we're going to say, if the command in our room underscore data is exits, then we're going to have a variable, which is our destination, and we're going to access the room data dictionary using the key exits, and we're going to access the actual commands. Oops, it's not going to be string, it's going to be the variable command. So now that we have this section here, the next part of this is going to be the blocking part of it. So this is just going to, and I'm going to get this. We're going to block the server room without the key card. So here we're just going to say if the all right. Yeah, I guess we don't. So we're going to say if the dest variable that's holding the values at the very top here is equivalent to server room, and key card is not in our state inventory, then we're going to just have st.write. And here is where we're going to write this information that we have below here. This is going to be our normal movement where we have a red light door, and then we're going to just get this one too. And we're just going to change this to be st.write. And at the end of this, we're just going to have our return statement. And so we can get rid of this subsection here. Okay, now the next thing we're going to have here is from the server room straight to getaway van. We're going to go to the vault choice function first, okay? So in this case here, we have if current room is equivalent to server room, and instead of choice, we're going to put dest. Going to get rid of this, but dest is equivalent to getaway van. Then inside of this function here, we are also going to call our log move function. And then we're going to update our state's location to being in the vault. And then we're going to return. And then the next thing we're going to ask is if test variable is equivalent to exit, then we're going to also call the log move function. And we're going to update the state game over to being true. And then we're going to do st.write. You head for the exit. The heist is over. And then we're going to have our return statement there. Okay. So in this case here, oops, I want to just make sure I place this here. So we're going to have, this is where we're going to be exiting to our safe house, the street, and anywhere else. We're just going to use, and think for this one, we have it being Q is assigned to exit. Okay. So now the next thing that we actually are going to do, and we're just going to get rid of the rest of this. And here we're going to have underneath our if statement. One, two, three. Okay. Yeah, all right. So underneath our if statement, we're going to finally call the log move function. We're going to also update the current room to being the whatever was picked for destination variable. And then we're just going to return. And then this part here is going to be aligned underneath the outer if statement for the exits, the commands for the exit. And we're just going to change this to be st.write. Save. Okay. So now we're actually done with this portion of our handle command function. I'm just going to type in done. And let me just make sure before I move on that we have completed everything in here. Inventory, rail, and okay. Okay, so yes, we are done with that portion. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do after our handle command is we need to go to our heist phase or heist function here. And this is actually where we are going to modify quite a bit of the code, but also including some portions in other places. So we will get there here very shortly. All right. Okay. So in this section here, what we're going to do is we are know that it's going to take in a state. And we want to actually, since we already have parts of this in a separate section, we can actually get rid of this whole section here. And we're obviously going to get rid of some of the functionality of this a little bit. But for the very top part of it, just typing it here. We are going to just pretty much have the command inputs for the map below with a fixed key. So we're going to assign to it a fixed key, but we're going to use Streamlit's input function. So we're going to say command, the variable command here, and we're going to use st.text_input. And we're just going to say, what do you do? Question mark, north, south, east, west, out, back, FB, search, hack, help, inventory, quit. And then on the outside here, we're just going to have, and I'm going to put it on new line so you guys can see this. We're going to assign to the key. And this is just going to be called command_input as the key here. Now, since this is actually going to be modified a bit differently than the actual terminal one, you don't necessarily need to have the header for this function because the heist functionality has been spread out between them. But if you want to, you can just do st.write and it will do the same thing. All right, so now here, what we're going to do is we want to have a ST button. We're going to have a button here that's going to allow us to submit a command. So we're going to say if st.button, and we're going to say submit command. And then inside of this if statement here, we're going to use our session states to actually get that command input. So we're going to do st.session_states.get. And we're going to get if it says command-input. And then we're going to have our empty string there. Now, the next thing we are going to actually have here is we have our handle command function done. So we know that this is what we actually want to call because this is going to do all of the functionality that we just went through. It's going to return to, or it's not going to return to us. It's just going to update the command and update the state in that way. So what we're going to do is copy the function header here. And we're going to paste it underneath the command. And so now this one passes in the command and the specific state. All right. So the next part of this is we're actually going to look at our room. So we're going to have room_name, and we're going to assign to it from whatever is in the state in the current_room there. Then we're going to say, if not room_name, then we're just going to write an error message. So we're going to say error, no current room. So this is if it used the empty string as a default in that way, or if they didn't write in a room. And then we're going to return. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we want to have our story and the room info at the top, because we're going to actually add in the map kind of at the end or the middle. So here is where we're going to call our show room function, passing in the room name and also the state dictionary. Okay. And if you want, again, you can display this out or leave it as a print for your own perspective here. So I'm just gonna copy that and room description. We can place it underneath the map part. All right, so the next part of this is actually going to be the map. And we already created a map section, but that was using Tkinter, right? And so in this case here, I'm going to modify the name of this function because it's going to be a different process for Streamlit. We're actually going to have to make a map image for it to see it on top of, for us to see it in Streamlit here. The map. All right. And this one is going to not take the current room, but it's going to take the room name. And it's also going to have our state role. That's going to be the same. But the difference here is we're actually going to want to return the map so that we can display it in Streamlit. So this is going to be a map image that we're going to use. And we will have to modify this function in a moment. But before we do, I'm just going to go ahead and finish this off in this function because, again, there's a lot of this that we don't need. So we don't need this anymore because we're not using Tkinter. We don't need this process anymore because we already had the game loop prior. We actually want to just have this be room name, as well as here room underscore name. All right. And so now here we have the map. We want to now write that map into Streamlit. So we're going to use map dot image. And as the first parameter, we're going to place the image in there. And then as the second parameter, we're going to have some caption. So this is just going to be heist floor plan avatar equals your current position. And then the third parameter, and I'll just place this again online so you can see it, is going to be, we just want this to have the container width to be set to true. And so we're going to have use underscore container underscore width. And if you have a different version of this, you may only need to use true, width, instead of use underscore container underscore width. So there are a few different processes here, just depending on what version of Streamlit you have or updated your code to have. So now that we are at this point here, the next phase or step of this that we're going to actually do is we want to go to the actual map image that we created above. We're going to modify this a bit. So I'm going to copy this function name here so I can keep it the same. And we're going to mark this function as done and minimize it. All right. So we're going to go to init. Oh, I know I deleted that. So I deleted the actual, did I? I don't think I did. I think I only deleted the parts up here. Okay, good. I didn't delete it. So here we're going to modify from our day 3 visualization, the init visual map. So where we initialize the visual map, but we were using Tkinter. Now we're going to just call it make underscore map underscore image. since that's what we're going to be doing in here. And we're not actually going to be using Tkinter whatsoever. So in this case here, I need to go to the very top where my import is. And I'm going to actually be using, we're going to be using pill, which is there's a pillow built-in function that has like a lot of different image parts that we can use. That's kind of like Tkinter, but it's a little bit different and it works well with Streamlit. So we're just going to say from PIL import image. Oops. And then we're going to go down to the function here. Start here. And I'm going to just have, this will just be the base. And again, with Tkinter, it was called root. We're just going to call it base, so the original image. And we're just going to say, assign to that image dot open, which is a built-in function to open our map. And at the very top here, we're going to use our see. Okay, well, in this case, we don't actually, we're going to add in there a map for the floor plan. And I know we have it in here. Okay, yeah, so in this case here, we're just going to copy this line with the heist floor plan 4.png or whatever your image is. And I'm going to assign it right underneath our van file. And I'm going to say, okay, this is the image or plan. I'm just going to say map underscore file. And we're just going to assign that there. So we have our heist floor plan .png. And with Streamlit, because when we run it, it's going to actually already be inside of our class project 3 folder. We actually don't need to have our in-class project, like the subfolder that it's in here to indicate where it actually is inside of that, like we did prior with the terminal version. So we're just going to get rid of that up here. And so now we have our files up here, right? We're going to go ahead and go back down to where we're going to continue making the modifications. So in this section here, after we have our open, we're just going to place in here that map underscore file. And we really just, it's one file, so doesn't need to have an S there. And then we're going to use something to actually called the convert. And we're just going to convert that to make sure that it pretty much contains the same kind of colors and everything with it. So we're just going to do RGBA. We're going to pass that in. And then the next thing we want to do is add in, or in this case, it's called draw, or we're going to be drawing the van onto the image as well. So we're going to also need to do the same thing for the van. So we're going to do image dot open, and we're going to pass in van file, convert, RGB. All right, just sure. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is now we want to actually showcase where we want to paste the van on our base here. So we're going to say base.paste. And this paste function is going to be accessing the first parameter is going to be the image we want to place on there. The second parameter is going to be the location, the X and Y value of where we are going to store the van. And in this case here, we know that we have a tuple at the top with the van's position. So we're going to go ahead and access that. So we're going to say van pixel position, and we're going to have our open close 0. And we're going to subtract that from the van's width. So we're going to do minus van dot width. And then we're going to do our division divided by 2 so that it can be placed right. And then we're going to do the same thing for the height. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it after the comma. And instead of 0, we're going to place this to be 1. And instead of width, we're going to place this to be height. And we're still going to divide by 2. And then lastly here, we're just going to say pretty much the third parameter is just going to be, the box of where the image is going to be stored, or even just adding in the key there. All right. Minus, okay. And make sure it's structure, so it's the same. All right, so the next thing we want to just do is go ahead and draw the avatar. So there is a lot of functionality here that we just don't need. And that's just because we already have everything set up. So we can actually just get rid of this Tkinter stuff. And we're just going to add from here. So we're just going to draw the avatar. And we're going to have our avatar's path being equivalent to the avatar files. And we're going to use the dictionary with the path of those avatars. And we're going to pass in role. And then we're going to also get access to the avatar files and initialize the first or the default value to be the hacker avatar. If nothing was picked by the user. So avatar here. And so the avatar variable is going to store the images. And so we're going to be looking at the same process that we did up here with the base and the van. So we're just going to say image dot open, passing in the avatar path as the first parameter and the only parameter. And then we're going to convert with RGBA. All right. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have our X and Y value for this. And we're just going to use the room pixel position to get the room name. And then we're also going to have a tuple here again, just to have the center being 50-50. We're going to place that there as well by default. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is just paste onto the floor plan, or the base in this case, the avatar that was picked. And then in the second parameter here, we're just going to have the X value minus the avatar width divided by 2. And this is going to make sure that this is placed in the right section where the X value should be. And then we're going to have the Y minus avatar height. And this is just going to be divided by 2 as well. And then we're also just going to make sure that we have it assigned a default with the avatar here. And then the very last thing we're going to do is just return the base. All right. Okay, and oh, I thought I changed the parameter. I did not. So the reason why this is highlighted is because this needs to be the first parameter, not the starting room. We have changed, modified this to fit Streamlit. So we're just going to do room name here. So now this is the map function done. Minimize that. Then the next thing that we're going to go through is going to be the hack screen. We're going to modify that. And again, we can actually just completely get rid of our update avatar. We no longer need this anymore. Everything is handled inside of the make map image. Okay. Okay. All right. So here we are at the hack screen here. Now, what we had before, which was inside of the enter room function, we had if the current room is equal to server room and the choice is equivalent to hack, then we want to use our while loop, and all this information was inside of the enter room. So what we're actually going to do is modify this a bit to suit in our separate screen, our separate hack screen a little bit differently. Because most of the commands that we saw, where's that, is in the handle command function. So these are all the commands here. So now we actually need to look at updating the values, or at least the information that gets displayed out, because all of that's done in the handle command. So we already have our dictionary with the hint. So what we're going to have next is our subheader. So we're going to do st subheader, and we're just going to say this is the hack terminal. We have st.write, and here we're just going to place in here a prompt blinks on the screen. Enter access word. And then we're just going to have our hint that's here right underneath that. So we're using our random function to randomly give one of these two hints to display what the word could be. And then afterwards here, we're also going to have our st.write. And we're just going to use our f string here to say hint. And we're going to have 2 dashes, and inside of those 2 dashes, we're going to have open, close curly braces and type in hint. So it will get displayed onto the actual screen. And then the next thing we're going to actually do is we're going to have our guess. right afterwards. But instead of using our input here, we are going to actually modify this to use our st.text underscore input. And we don't necessarily need this anymore with the f string. But here we will need, don't need string either. But here we will say access word colon, because this is where the user is going to enter in input. And then on the outside of this, we're going to assign to this a key, and we're going to call it hack underscore guess. All right. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to get our button. And again, at the end, we're going to strip it and uppercase it so we don't have to worry about that. So here we're going to just say if st.button, and we're going to say submit guess colon guess equals st.session underscore state. So we're going to be using our session state here, and we're going to get the hack underscore guess. If it's assigned to that specific state there, otherwise we're going to assign to it a default value. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to be looking at the current room. So we're going to create a variable here called current underscore room. And we're going to access the state of the current room that we are in. And then the next thing we're going to say is if guess is equivalent to ghost, then here we're going to have st.write. And we're going to say the terminal accepts the word and opens deeper systems. Then we're going to have the state where we have money underscore gained plus equals 20,000. The state open close square brackets. We already have that done here. All right, yeah, we'll use our risk level here. We'll just copy and paste that here. But what we're gonna do with this risk level is we want to modify it a bit because we are using a button. And we want to make sure that it always brings back something bigger. So we're going to be using our max built-in function here. And we're going to initialize the first value to be 0 so that we don't always get a negative value, or we don't get a negative value for any risk level. So it's either going to be 0 or whatever is in that state's risk level minus 1. So let's just make sure if your risk level is like you really have no risk whatsoever, and by chance it turns back something different, like negative something, which it won't, it will always return back the max value to be 0 in this case. And then the next thing we're actually going to do is we are going to call the log move, the log move function here on this line. And we're going to pass in the current room. And as the command here, what we're actually going to have is called hack dash success. We're going to pass in the current room and the state. And then here, we're just going to update our state mode here. And we're just going to assign to it the string normal. Then afterwards, what we're going to use is our st rerun. And so this is just going to rerun to make sure that we can actually update the code and we can see the new items that are on there because of the way that Streamlit works. So we have an else statement here. And in our else statement, get rid of this. We will actually use some of this functionality. So we'll go ahead and place it here. And we're going to tab this over and get rid of this pass. And what we have here is we have our else statement, but we're going to place in here the hack attempts. So we're going to do state, open, close square brackets, and we're going to have our hack attempts here. And then on the other side here, we're just going to make sure that we subtract that by 1. And then inside of here, we're just going to say if the state, open, close square brackets, hack underscore attempts is greater than 0, then we're just going to do st.write. And here we're just going to say access denied, attempts remaining, colon, open, close curly braces, and we're just going to showcase the state that it, or the value that's associated to this hack attempts key here. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to call our log move function. And as the command, instead of hack success, we're actually just going to have our value saying hack dash hack dash fail. And so it calls with the current room, the hack fail, the current room, and also the state. And so the next thing we want to actually have after that if statement is we're going to have an else statement. And we're just going to say st.write, and we're just going to say access denied dot, and we're going to say the system locks you out dot. And then afterwards on this next line here, we are just going to paste our log move function again and pass in our command here as hack dash locked. And then afterwards here, we're just going to have our state mode here. And we're going to assign to it normal. And then we're going to have our st.rerun function here. We'll get rid of this line here. So now we account for if they fail, if they're locked out, and if they have succeeded. Okay. So make sure all of this is right. Okay. Now this function is done. So far, we may have to come back and modify some things. If when we run it, we see that there are any errors, but it's done so far. Then the next thing we're going to do is actually modify the final vault state. So before we actually had our vault decision where the terminal version printed out numbered options and you use the input to read 1, 2, or 3. In the Streamlit version, though, I'm just going to use a radio button for the 3 choices and a commit vault choice button to confirm when the player commits to the specific choice that they pick, and then update the money, the risk, and the morale, and then set the game over to being true. So the app can move to the ending screen there. All right, so in this specific function here, we gonna actually have a subheader. So we're gonna do st.subheader, and we're just gonna place final vault decision. And here we have our first st.write, where we're going to write our final vault message. And for the choices, we actually are not going to necessarily need this anymore, so we can get rid of that print. But we're going to actually keep this here for right now so that we can copy this into our radio button. So here we're just going to do choice as the variable here. And we're going to also have st.radio. And we're just going to have as a label final data choice. And then as the second parameter in this, we're going to have a comma and we're going to have a list. And for me, because I'm, again, recording this, I'm just going to have this on the new line so you can actually see it proper. So the first one here, we're just going to have the string of grab as much as possible, paste it there, comma, another string. We're going to have take only the most incriminating files, moderate money, lower risk, paste it there, comma. And then here we're just going to have plant a virus to expose the company, little money, more moral win, plant it here. And then we're just going to get rid of this because we don't need this anymore up here, that string. All right, so now we actually have this here. We're also going to place here an index. So we're going to have the index be initialized as default by 1. So it could pick the first one or not. Okay. So now that we have this process done here, we're going to move on to the if part with the vault. So we don't actually need the input anymore because the radio button takes care of that. But we do need to create a button. So we're going to say if st.button, and we're going to have the string of commit vault choice. Then here we're just going to have current room, and we're going to access our state dictionary with the current room in it. Or if it is the data vault here. So if they're in the current room or it's data vault, then the next process here, just move this over, we'll change some things. So in this if statement here, we'll get rid of the condition and modify it ourselves. We're going to say if it has the grab as much as possible and it's in the choice, so that choice that they picked, then it's going to we're going to change this to st.write. And then here we do have where our money gained is updated and our state risk level is updated. Here we're actually just going to make sure that we call our log move function. Paste. And as the command, instead, we're going to pass in an argument. And we're going to call it vault-1. Current room vault, current room state. Okay. And then we're going to have our if-elif statement. And inside of here, we're just going to say incriminating if it's in the choice that the user actually displayed. We're just going to do st.write. We have our money risked, our money gain, and our risk level. And then we're going to call our log. And we're just going to change this argument to be vault2. And then we're going to have our else statement here. And inside of this, we're just going to have our st.write, st.write. And we're going to call our log move function. And here we're just going to pass in volt3. And then at the very end of this, aligned underneath the else statement, so outside of all of this, but still in the button, we're just going to update the skate to be game over. And we're just going to assign to that the Boolean variable true. And so our final vault process has been updated with everything that I talked about at the very beginning before we added any code here. So it all should work the way that we would like, but we do have to test it again later. And now the next thing we want to look at is we want to pay attention to the planning. We want to make sure that we modified the start button. Okay, we already added that, so this is fine. All right, so the next thing what we're actually going to do is we're going to now update our innate state function, and then we're going to modify some other processes as well. So in this, I'm just going to go ahead and create that duck string that I mentioned. This is just going to create or update the game state in our Streamlit app. And this is going to be using session state. Now we have our location planning, role none, route none, risk level 0, money gain 0, crew morale 3, game over false, inventory, empty list, our visited rooms, an empty set. And then the next thing we actually are going to have here is the mode that we've been using, and we're going to default set that to normal. And then we're going to have our hack temps, set that to 0. And then we're going to have our history. And that's going to be an empty list here because this is what we're going to use. This is going to be the list of commands, and we're going to use it from where you are or from where the user came from, the command that was used, and then also to where the user is going. So now that we have that, the next thing we need to do is just initialize the state. So here we're just going to say, if the state is not in st session.state here, then we're going to assign to the session state and what we're actually going to do, because this is using session states, we're just going to call this default, this dictionary default state, so it doesn't interact with the components of Streamlit in this way. So we're just going to assign that dictionary to this state. So if we're not in a session state, meaning we're already playing the game, then we'll move on to the else statement. But if we haven't played the game, we're just going to assign the default values in our dictionary to that. So then we're going to have our else statement. And we're just going to use the variable state here. And we're just going to say st session underscore state dot state. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use a for loop, and this is going to make sure that all the keys exits are together in case we want to add new ones later. So or I'm sorry, this is going to make sure that all of the keys exist actually in case we want to add more later. So we're just going to say for key value, yep, in default state dot items, and we're grouping them here in this way. If key not in state, state key equals, we're going to assign to it whatever the value is. All right. So now we've kind of finished up our state setup here. Just gonna say that this is done for right now. If there are no errors, we'll come back. Okay, so the next thing we're actually wanting to work on is the log move, so the history of our code. And what we're gonna do is just copy this. We're gonna group them together so it's easier to see. So, okay, here it is. Like I want to see that thing. Okay, so here I'm just going to create a tag here or a header, and I'm just going to say history logging. Paste this here. Okay. And the first thing we're going to do is work on the log move function. So in this parameter here, just to make sure that we kind of get the understanding of how the room works, we're going to just say from room here. Oops. To keep with the process, the command that we use, and then we're going to say to room, this is going to be its local variable. We're changing that parameter. And then inside of this log move function here, we're just going to create a, okay, just and here we're just going to say this is just going to append a move or action to the history list. And this is the list that is inside of our default state. And so here we're just going to say if history not in state, then we're just going to assign to that history. We're going to create the key, and we're going to assign to it an empty string. Now here we're just going to say state history. And this is if it is in there, we're just going to append. And in this case, we're just going to append a dictionary to this history. So we're going to have our from, with that being the key. Oops. Yeah. And we're just going to use the from room variable, comma. And then here we're just going to have the command, comma. And then here we're going to have 2, colon, and we're going to use the to room, comma. And so now here we have appended to the history, and that's going to be in our history here. The commands that we're adding to it. Now, inside of our show history function here, so I'm just going to go ahead and type in done. We now want to show the move history as a JSON file in a drop down kind of way, still on the Streamlit screen. And so we're going to say history equals, we're going to assign to it the state, and we're going to get history, comma, and we're going to create a, spell that right, history. And we're going to just make the default be an empty string. Then we're going to say if history then we're going to use with st.expander, which is a built-in function. It allows you to insert multiple elements and kind of have a collapsible or drop-down menu here. So inside of that, we're just going to place in there show move history. And we're just going to say it's in the JSON format. And then here we are going to have our colon. And we're just going to use our st.json and paste the history or pass in the history as a parameter there. So that's done. Okay. So now that we are pretty much done with that process, we want to be able to test out our code to make sure everything works. We're going to open up everything. And I'm glad that we did, because we do need to make sure that every function is actually operating the way that we would like it to. And particularly for this handle special rooms, we need to be able to display it. And so we need to make sure that we're using our st.write for them. So we're going to replace all of the print statements. But first, what I'm going to do is just go from the very top, and we're going to move down to make sure that everything is set right. Okay. First things first, we're looking at the rooms. So we have all of our descriptions of the rooms. That's not really going to need much modification, so that's fine. We have our coordinates, our positions. We actually don't need our visual state here because we're no longer using Tkinter, so we can get rid of that. We have our avatar file, our band, and our map. We have our initial state, which we just went through, and so everything in there should be good. So we will close that out. Then we have our make map image. So we know that we have our base, our van, we have the paste, the avatar, going through all of this, have all that information. Next, in the show introduction, we have converted all the stuff that we needed, so that's fine. In the planning phase, we want to also make sure that we kind of went through that correctly. Okay. And we do show the history there, so that's fine. And now looking into the handle special logic, if room. And so in this case here, again, we need to make sure that this says st.write. We want to do that for all of the prints. All right. So this is good. We'll close that out. That is actually done now. Okay, so now we're in the showroom. Just want to make sure room name. We have our room data, st.write, we have all that. Handle special room logic, that call. Okay, so all of this is from what we see so far is good. Now with the handle command, I'm gonna make sure all that's correct. Hmm. Inventory, st.write. Did we? Okay, yep. And next thing here is st.write. Okay, good. Current room, return. And then we have our movements here with the exit, and we did convert all of that. Okay, and then I see right. Okay, so this one is good. Now the next one, the hack screen. We converted all of that. Did we call things correctly? Oh, it's actually this one. That's right. Um, yeah. Got our rerun, log. Okay, so here is where we are missing. We want to show our history. So we're going to call show underscore history with the state here. So this one is good. All right, and then we're going to go to the final bolt choice. Just this one, okay. Good. And again, this one with the final bolt choice, we want to make sure that that also has the show underscore history passing in the state. And that's good. And then the next one is the print heist. So yeah, for this one, we do need to make sure that we have this as our header. So we want to make sure we use our st.write here and st.write and st.write. And since this is a header, we'll just say this is our subheader. Okay. And then we also have our information here. And since we fortunately were able to place it all in one here, we can actually just do st.write for one line. And here we're going to do the same thing, st.write, uh, st.write. Okay. And then at the very end of this, we again would love to be able to display out the show history function here. Okay, now this one is done. All right. Now the next one we have is I think we already went through our planning screen. So it should be, oh yeah, we're in the heist phase. So the handle command. We have the show room, map image, and at the very end here, we are just going to have the show underscore history and pass in the state. We are done with that. So, and the same thing here, we already checked this off. All right. So now the next thing we actually need to do is save the code and now start running it to test it. So I'm going to go to the top of my Visual Studio Code, click on terminal, and then click on new terminal. And my virtual environment is already activated. If you've not already activated it, make sure that you do. But I'm going to make sure that I pretty much change directory into the folder that my images are in. And so I'm just going to do CD and actually, let's see what's LS. In class project 3. So let's say CD in class project 3. Okay. And then we're going to do LS in this. And okay, we have our information here with our images. So now here I'm going to do Streamlit run, and I'm going to run my project file name here. So I'm going to do projects3 streamlit.py and click enter. And when we click enter, this is what pops up. And there is a minor issue that I have in line 341 in our planning phase function. So we want to go back to our code here and see what the issue is. And it's going to be 341 current room. Okay. Start room. Okay. This here. Okay, and so the issue that we are actually seeing or having in this case is it needs to actually be in the button because it's being accessed inside of our button branch here. So we're going to just tab this in and save it and go back to this screen. And we will actually change this setting so we can see the color a bit better here. Clear the cache and rerun. Okay, so that seemed to work out well. So we have here our st.write information. We have the hacker, and we're going to click on the remote. We have our little output information. If you don't necessarily like this text box stuff, you can just do st.write for each one, and it will just display it the way that you would like. I'm going to click on my start heist. Oh, it's taking its time. My computer's a bit slow. See. Stop this. And I'm gonna have to rerun this again. This is more or less like a little bit of technical difficulties along with a bit of maybe a few issues, not sure, but we're going to go ahead and run this. You know, the button isn't even showing. So let's go ahead and take a look, see at what the issue is here. I just think it's a bit slow. So I'm gonna, okay, here we go. Start the heist. Okay. So we have our information that gets displayed, and then of course, a little bit of misspelling here, probably. Object has no attribute convert yet because it's meant to be convert. What line is that? 260. Say, all right, let's rerun. All right, great. So we now have our little image that shows up. So we're going to type in E here, submit command. Then we're going to go to 431. Ah, I see here. I actually don't want this to be a string. I want it to actually be the variable current room. So I can't really assign anything if it doesn't what it is. So I'm going to save that and rerun it. Mm, Let's clear the cache because this is important. All right. Something. What's this do? All right, so I'm going to pause the video until it loads properly onto the screen, and then we'll run through it again to see where if we have any issues that we need to check out. All right, so we have our hacker, and we're going to click on the remote hack safe smaller score, and we're going to start by clicking on our start heist button, and then all right, so after I press submit, we have our map that pops up with, remember from the project, just the logical coordinates. And then we have our surveillance ban information that pops up. So we're going to go ahead and go to the lobby. So we're going to type in E, press the submit button, and now we're in the corporate lobby, and our avatar has moved from the van to that lobby. And we also see the commands and the move history here. So from command to. And that is an issue. It should actually be to the lobby. So we need to go ahead and check that code real quick. So in our code, we are actually going to need to go to the handle commands section. And I see already where the error is. We're passing in current room and current room again. So in this case, what I'm going to just do is go through all of the log move function. I'm going to start with the very first one. And I'm just going to change where we have current room. So I'm going to paste this here in the uh, dialog box here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste it here again. And where the current room is, I'm actually going to place in, I believe, the section that we are kind of missing. And let me see here. If command this. Where are the exits? Here. All right, so the issue is in the exits portion where all three of these are kind of looking at the specific current room. And so I want to make sure that what gets modified isn't those, but we're going to look at the exits. So here we're just going to change where it says current room to update it with the DEST here for the destination. And so this now should be able to, when we click enter, update it. It did enter, update that one, and then here we're going to update that again. All right. And so we do have here, we're in the exits, we've updated where it says current room to just being the destination. So we're going to save this and now rerun it and see, well, I just have to clear the cache, then rerun. All right, so this is the next attempt of actually running this. I did already press the start heist button, and we're back at running the code. We are right now inside of the van, so we're just going to click on E to get to the lobby, submit that, and we're in the lobby. And then we finally see, okay, going from the van to the lobby. So now this functionality works perfectly fine. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually go to the office as the hacker. So we're just going to type in S here, making more mistakes for this thing to start over. And now we're in the office below here. So now we see we're going from the lobby to the office and we see the command. Now the next thing we actually want to do here is we're in the office and it says here that we notice that there is a locked desk drawer. So we can actually try to search the room. And so here we're just going to type in search, submit the command. We find out that we get the corporate key just to check to see if it's inside of our inventory. Gonna type that in. We see that we are carrying the key card, which is great. And then the next thing here, what we're gonna do is we want to go to the server room, which is over here. So we're just gonna type in E, submit, and we move from the office to the server room. And again, all of this information from the search, the inventory to the server room is all located in our show move history. Now that we're inside of the server room and we are the hacker, what we are going to want to actually do is we're going to type in hack. So we're just going to type in HACK, submit. And now we're taken to a portion where we're at the hacking terminal. It says a prompt blinks on the screen. We want to enter access code. So here we see the hint of what we need to hack in. And as the hacker, you kind of don't have much here. So I'm just going to put G. Submit. And then here we see, okay, that hack failed. So we're going to go ahead and type in GHOST, submit. And it seems like that worked. So we had success. We hacked into the system. So now that we've hacked into the system, the very next thing we want to do is get into our getaway van. So we're going to type in G here, submit. And we see that we are in the getaway, or we're going to go to the getaway command. And then finally, at the very, very end here, after we've typed in G to server, we now have our final vault decision. So it says that we're standing at the main data terminal inside the vault, and we need to pick one of these final data choices. So I'm just gonna click on take only the most incriminating files, and then I'm gonna click on commit vault choice here. And we see that we clicked on Vault 2, so that displays. We also have thank you for playing Cyber Heist, the final upload. And we also have the outcome of our actual data information. And then if you want to play again to get different outcome, then feel free to. So this is just how you go ahead and convert the Streamlit or the Python file into a Streamlit application here. So hope this video helped. Have a great rest of your day. And if you run into any problems, feel free to let me know.